Everyone, welcome. My name is Laura. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at the Seward Co-op. Welcome to our annual Indigenous Foods class series, a collaboration between Seward Co-op, Dream of Wild Health, and the Indigenous Food Network. Seward Co-op is located in Dakota Territory, where Dakota, Ojibwe, and many other Native people continue to live and exercise their sovereignty. This is the fourth year of this class series, which was developed through Seward Co-op's long-term partnership with Dream of Wild Health, one of the oldest and longest operating Native American-led nonprofits in the Twin Cities, also celebrating 26 years this year, which is very exciting. And the Indigenous Food Network, which is a collaborative of Native-led community organizations in Minneapolis, who are working together to rebuild a sovereign food system. Today we are welcoming Derek Nicholas, the Traditional Foods Program Nutrition Coordinator at Division of Indian Work, and Hope Flanagan, Community Outreach and Culture Teacher at Dream of Wild Health. This is the fourth year they're teaching this series with us, and you can find videos of their past classes at seward.coop. If you have any questions for the instructors during this class, you can just drop them in the chat and I will feed them over to them and they will answer. And with that, I'll pass it over to Derek and Hope.
Bonjour, Nagani Benes, Nindago, Mokwa Nindudem, the Soba College of Kaish, Gaelic Plan, Derek Nicholas, and Bishop Kazo, Jagina Shingwan, Kakabakan Ninda, Adano Key, Division of Indian Work, and the Buckway, and the LAE. Hello, everybody. My name is Nagani Benes. I'm a member of the Redfoot Band of Ojibwe, which is a reservation in northern Wisconsin, right by the island. I'm also known as Derek Nicholas. I live here in Minneapolis. I'm the Traditional Foods Nutrition Program Coordinator at Division of Indian Work. For those who aren't familiar with Division of Indian Work, we're a nonprofit based here in Minneapolis. I think we've been around for 70 years now. And our mission is to support our urban Native community. So we offer a lot of different programs and resources to do so. So to name a couple of the resources that we have, we offer a food shelf. We also have a diaper bank, and then our programs are of many. So some of them are like a youth leadership development program where we have young kids and we do cultural activities with them, help them with homework and stuff like that. We also have a women's traditional birthing program where we help our young women as they go into that stage of their life. My role as the Traditional Foods Nutrition Program Coordinator is I cook for our programs, cooking healthy, culturally appropriate foods, and do a lot of outreach and education around our Indigenous foodways. Thank you for having us, Seward Co-op. It's a pleasure to always be here and to be a part of this Indigenous Food Series. And grateful to be here again with my dear Hope. I'll pass it on to her.
I'm really grateful to be here too. I think so highly of this young man. Ajigwani we named him on all wing the try to dunk Omanu Buche, Gagigit Mache, name him on all go Nujigo region. Nudin Ensique Indigo, making up the name, Tawan is going to get in Jaba. The Nokia, yeah. Me way to go in here, yeah, a she ain't go so the Bunicus, I've been over there at Dream Wild Health for 16 summers, working with the young people in food. Hoden or Shawnee now, I'm Seneca. Again, India, Enokia, me, Oma, the Kabi Kangi, Ashibagazibing, May was on the I've been working here with the Minneapolis American Indians community and the St. Paul American Indian community since the late 70s. So it's been a pleasure to learn from different elders over the years and to share what's been passed on to me. My role as an older person now is to pass it on to the young ones. And I'm so grateful to be here with Derek because he remembers and he goes out and he gathers. And that's the hard thing to find. A lot of people, when they go out, they see only a green wall and they don't see that each one of the plants are individual relatives. And each individual relative have individual gifts. So today we're doing a wonderful combination of different native plants to think about our old food systems and revitalize some of our old food systems and revitalize some of our old foods that kind of get overlooked or forgotten. Just to remember that they're there, they're giving us gifts all the time, whether we know it or not. It's just like us, and just like every living being, every single living being has a gift. And this is a time in the world I feel like we need to recognize that every plant, every animal, every insect, we have a purpose and we have a reason for being here. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Mr. Derek here, because I enjoy spending time with him out in the woods and collecting plants and food and spending time looking at what's out there that's been in our native food diets for many, many, many years, and how do we eat in a way that supports health.
Yeah, thank you for those very kind words. Today we'll be showcasing an indigenous seafood boil. The reason why I do the air quotes on seafood is because this food isn't necessarily from the sea that we're focusing on, but from our lakes and our rivers here in Minnesota and the Great Lakes region. A lot of these ingredients here are actually plants or animals that Hope and I have gathered together. So it kind of is like a sneak peek into our life and all like the great nutrition that's out there to consume. So when it comes to starting like a seafood boil, obviously like the most important component is having water. You're gonna need water to cook the ingredients, so we're gonna want to like season it up very nicely. So I feel like in a typical, this is like kind of like my rip off like a Cajun seafood boil. So I feel like normally there's always like onions in there. So we're gonna add some ramps. The ramps are like our wild onions that we can find in the springtime. I don't know if Hope wants to elaborate a little bit on this.
We're very fortunate here in Minnesota that we still have our Chicago one gene, that's how you would say wild onions, but Budget Chicago one gene. But you can see right now he's using the leafy part, which you certainly can use the leafy part, and that would keep the root, the bulb, so the bulb can again put out the leaves again. Sometimes people would gather the bulbs we used to when there was a lot of bulbs out there. Now we kind of have to change how we look at access to wild foods, because we always want to respect, if the population is struggling, then we need to change how we gather. Always put down your thank yous before you take anything. So just yesterday I was out in the woods picking, and I did go to a place where I've been gathering the wild onions in the last few years, but I did not see the seeds. With climate change, those kinds of things are going to happen. I know the bulbs are under the ground, but they didn't come up because this was an odd year with the floods at the beginning and then the drought. So I did not see the seeds where I should be seeing the seeds. Plants can be really patient. So I'm assuming those bulbs are just waiting until they have the right time to come up. I do really like wild garlic too, and that one's a lot harder to find. I know I go every year to Wisconsin and get the woodland wild garlic over there. It's got a sweeter and more powerful flavor, and it likes to grow underneath hemlock. But you have to remember that if you're looking for wild plants, they like to be with their certain comrades, you might say, so they can flourish. So when people look at systems, sometimes they forget about this is a whole network where the plants are working together.
Thank you. So now like the next element is like, we also see in a lot of the Cajun seafood boils is like to put in some form of like citrus, like a lemon. I don't think not to my knowledge, we have anything like that, but we do have the sweet gale. I've found this growing over at my reservation, kind of growing close to the shores of Lake Superior, and these nuggets on here, they offer I kind of call it like a citrusy flavor. I don't know if you get that flavor out of it a little bit, but yeah. So we're gonna put that in there. Also like the leaves are kind of like a native bay leaf, so we're gonna put some of the leaves in there to achieve that flavor. And then with the nuggets, I dehydrate them and then I powderize it. And so this is like a lot more of a concentrated flavor of that citrusy thing. It's the nuggets, these, I don't know if I'm using the right term, nuggets, but the sweet gale nuggets.
Nutlets, sometimes.
I think it goes really good with like poultry.
It's a good meat rub, and it is an actual relative of bay. So you will find it up north, like in the Boundary Waters or Superior National Forest. It's a powerful nitrogen fixer. So instead of being like a legume, you'll see it growing where there's no soil, because a lot of times what happened for native folks, they would put us on land where there was bad land for growing. So people would be put in an area where you couldn't have corn plants, bean plants, any kind of plants. So something like the sweet gale works to create soil. And people are just now realizing how amazing these plants are in working to give these gifts. So this particular one, the Ojibwe name says yellow water maker is how you would say it. So that's what he's doing right now. And you'll see that it's starting to turn yellow. The interesting thing is if you spill it though, it stains black. Have you ever seen that? It's very strong. It's like, whoa, I just left a big old black stain on my counter. So yeah.
And then another ingredient we're gonna add, just playing around here, is the prickly ash. I feel like this also has like a citrusy flavor, but then it also has like a very like sharp, numbing sensation. I believe it's like a distant relative of the Szechuan peppercorn. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of this in, and when it's like fresh, dang, it'll knock you right on your butt. So strong.
Some of the students from Drew Wild Health, we always try it when it's just ready. It's usually in August. You'll see red, there's a little outside, it looks like a little tiny seed, and then it splits open and there's two little shiny black seeds on the inside. The red outside is the part that when you put it in your mouth, it's like, oh, this is delicious. It tastes like lemon lime. And then like, oh, but wait a minute, the black part has kind of a black pepper flavor. And then, oh my goodness, it's tingling. Wait, well, I'm gonna fill my mouth. So it's once you let it dry out a little bit, then it's not as powerful. But even in the wintertime, I've picked it to use as a toothache medicine. So you use the medicinal part would be the inside bark of the prickly ash. It is also a good when it breaks down and you have the mycelium. It's another one that fungi like to grow off of, like morels.
Yeah.
One time my parents were visiting, and we were out in the community. It was like a storytelling event.
Yeah.
And it was at the Division of Indian Work. So I was like, hey mom, I want you to try this. And I gave her some of the prickly ash. And she just started like, she was really going through it. And she was just like, couldn't stop coughing. I had to like keep going in the water. I think she was all embarrassed. Pretty funny. And then lastly, to season this up, kind of a cheat code. But Old Bay is kind of necessary when you're doing seafood boils. I guess I could have took my time, been a little creative, and came up with a indigenous option, but trying to make this accessible for more people. So I feel like this is just go to. I'm thinking I probably could have just made like almost like a chili sauce, just like blend up some chilies with some water and put it in there. Just made it kind of simple like that, and that would have been more kept in the integrity of the dish, but.
And that's kind of interesting, what we're finding with climate change, that chilies are one of the plants that we've seen at the farm seem to be doing better. I was recently at the Emerging Farmers Conference, and we see that chilies can take more biodiversity, I should say that, more climate diversity. So we need to be paying attention to what's going to be able to take the wetter, the drier, the hotter, the colder, because it's going to be more on that scale. I did bring some, what used to be used, and I know that Derek has used this in the past. It was our old salt, because we did not have salt, but we had plants where you could create a salt element. So this one right here is one. Hard to find nowadays. This one is colt's foot, and you would burn it and then use the ash as salt. But we want to make sure we're mindful of people's flavor system. We don't want to say, okay, this is going to be tough to get used to. So I know the Old Bay is probably a good decision to go on that route.
Yeah, so now the next thing we want to do is like start putting in ingredients that are going to take longer to cook. So the first one we're going to want to do is like our wild potatoes. We chose to do the swan potatoes, just like the potatoes that grow like in the water. They grow in the water, and so we're kind of like keeping that seafood theme. There's a lot of wild potatoes. Hope's brought a bunch of them, so maybe we'll talk about it as we got some filler time at the end. But these are what the swan potatoes look like. This is a really bad example because they've been in the fridge for 3 to 4 weeks now. They're all shriveled up and they don't look in their normal state. But I wanted to put this in my refrigerator to see the shelf life on them, see how long they can go in the fridge without being peeled. And they've lasted about maybe like a week and a half. But I also wanted to bring this to demonstrate what they look like.
You could set it out so people can
Yes.
really see. Now, in the Dakota, Lakota communities, you would call this duck potatoes. Oh, that's a beauty right there. In the Ojibwe community, you'd say that's swan potatoes. If you like the Hunger Games, Katniss is what they're referring to there. That's Katniss. So, of course, she kind of had a reputation for finding wild foods, right? So that's one of our wild foods here. What I love about this guy is he's experimenting around, like how do you get the food to bring out the qualities that we're most comfortable with? I know that the Dakota communities have been really generous with allowing us to come and try things with the swan potatoes and the duck potatoes. So they came in and allowed us to go and gather in the mud and to see, let's see how many we can find and what can we do with the flavors. And then they prepared some of the swan potatoes to see what does the texture, what does the flavor taste like.
So one of the ways that we can preserve them is that we would peel them, we'd peel the skins, and then you can cut them in half, leave them out to dry. I laid them on a baking tray, but on the baking tray I had one of those coolant racks, so I was able to get air underneath it and from above. They dried out very nicely. Then I also
Beautiful.
And then I also experimented taking the whole ones and putting a awl through it, and then running culinary twine through it and hanging it up to dry. Now, since I've been playing around with it, I've noticed that the ones that I left whole, I parboiled some of these before the class because they can take a long time to reconstitute and get into a nice texture. But I'm realizing the ones that I left whole and just poked a hole through it and laid it to dry, they've kind of gotten a little bit mushy when I reconstituted them, and they also like are facing oxidization. That's why it's facing that darker color. But for this one right here, where I cut in half, or this one's probably a quarter and went out to dry, it still has like, it's not as mushy and it still has like that nice white color. So I think maybe moving forward, I'm just gonna try to like dice them up more, lay them out to dry instead of putting them up on a string. But these are still good, you know, taste really good, tastes fine, and the texture ain't too bad. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just more of like, if you're trying to make food look pretty, this is probably the most appetizing compared to the other ones that we have.
Another reason I admire this young man, you know, if you're dealing with foods you're not familiar with, well, make sure you have the right food for one thing, and that you're looking at how do I make this palatable to my audience or to whoever's going to try these foods. So I love that he was figuring out different ways. I just did an old style, and I'll probably have much mushier and much more bitter swan potatoes than he did, because he was looking at different ways of processing it and make it most appealing to whoever's going to eat the foods. Now, that's one thing I do want to lift up. What he said is old style, you would dry it and you have to dry it thoroughly. So I know some of the old style potatoes, because in Ojibwe you would say Openik, and there's lots and lots of different wild potatoes. So the ones that's most common is Bogwaji Openik. These are wild potatoes, but you have to soak them for a good day so they can totally get saturated, and then boil them and boil them and boil them. So this summer we had some people from the Cherokee Nation come from Oklahoma, but they came from a dry area where there were no wild potatoes anymore, but they have a wild potato clan. And this is who they're talking about, this particular potato. I used to do presentations of the wild potato, Bongoji Opani, and a Lakota friend of mine would do the wild turnips, the tipsina or tipsila. So they both, you might say, that's not even edible. It's not ever gonna be edible, but it's the same way where you go like, no, that's basically a white rock. No, you just soak it and boil it and boil it, and it ends up being really flavorful and like potato. So sort of the same theory of what we're doing here. So some of our old, what we would call potatoes or sources of starch, that's how you would process them, is make sure they get dry.
So now the next element to a seafood boil is the corn. So obviously corn is native to North America and South America, Central America. This is some heirloom red lake corn. One of my elders has been carrying the seed with his family for a very long time. From the story that I heard from him, like his ancestors, the women, they sewed it into the hems of their dresses and carried it with them because a lot of times we were forcibly removed from our lands and we needed food to survive, and that was one of the ways the government would control us was through the power of food. So our women were always thinking ahead and thinking of the people and making sure that we're always well fed. This red lake heirloom corn is very colorful. As you can see, we got like some yellows in there, some whites in there, some dark reds, some almost purplish colors. A lot of people that they take their corn very seriously, so they'll kill the seed. And the way they kill the seed is by doing the process of nixtamalization. So our Indian corn, you have to process it in a certain way, typically with hardwood ash, and that would make the nutrition available. If you don't do that, then you're not getting the nutrients out of the plant. And so a lot of people, they use our seeds as power, whether it's like for selling or to commercialize it. So a lot of people who really carry those really old seeds, they want to protect it. So they'll kill the seed and then they can turn it into hominy like such, and they can dehydrate it. They can freeze it, and then they can gift it out to people, and everyone can taste this beautiful gift of this medicine, this food, without having to worry about people taking advantage of the plant itself.
So, can I interrupt with a question? A while back, there was a mention of a name of a plant that's in the bay family. Do you remember what that was?
Sweet ale
Sweet gale.
is the English name.
Yes, thank you. Beautiful.
And the nutlets are the strongest when you can use the leaves. It makes a very nice golden spicy tea if you want to make a flavorful tea out of it as well. But often it's used as a meat rub. And like Derek was saying, like poultry, it's wonderful on poultry. But just as a basic bay flavor for our seafood boil.
Yeah, so the corn is like such a gift. A lot of tribes highly value the corn, and you can use it for food, medicine, and utility. I know at DIW we do a lot of crafts around the corn. There's making like little flowers out of the husks or those dolls. So that's always a fun thing for the kids to get hands on with.
We just recently at Drew Wild Health had a corn festival, and we're hoping to have one again next fall. So it's open to the public, and we had, I think, over 300 people show up to try some of the different kinds of corn and pounding corn and learning about hominy and trying hominy and roasting different kinds of corn that we grow out at the Drew Wild Health Farm. We have 30 acres and we grow food, and the food that we produce, we're teaching young people how to grow food, how to find food, how to cook food, and how to develop what we would call it a mindset of food sovereignty. So I want to give a little props to Seward, because Seward Co-op here always makes sure that they have living seeds. So they don't have dead end seeds. Dead end seeds would be, they can grow and produce, and then they won't have a next generation. So for the seeds, always make sure you're growing and eating foods that are living, that aren't designed just to make money. I'm always suspicious of why would you want to eat something that's designed to die. Let's make sure it's feeding life. So things to think about when you're eating in self-defense.
Yeah, so we got our seasoning in, we got our wild potatoes in, and our hominy in. So next element to this dish is we're going to add some sausage. This is some beautiful bison sausage that was gifted from Seward Co-op. I believe the name is Metwurst.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm pronouncing that.
it's like
Is that how you say it?
Metawurst or
Okay. So
something.
I'm not sure what makes Metalwurst a Metalwurst, but we tried a few different kinds of bison sausages that were brought from Seward Co-op, and this one was the best one. I felt like had the best flavor, and then it didn't get too dried out. So I'm just gonna cut it into some bigger chunks, but then also like bite size worthy. And sausage is amazing, you know. And so I'm a big fan of moose sausage. I've had some not too long ago, and yeah, my new aunt, he gets a lot of moose, so not too long ago he just gifted me some moose ribs, and I'm excited to try those out. I want to try doing like a dry rub on them, using like what I'm thinking right now is like maple sugar, the cold foot,
Ooh.
prickly ash, some chilies. And some like choke cherries.
That's a beautiful thing. Just a little bit about gratitude. I'm thinking about, I was just up there in Canada for moose hunting camp. And it's sort of a way to think about this time of year. People will want to say, well, right today, this is the day I'm going to be thankful. Please be thankful every day. We're so fortunate we have access to water, we have access to food, we have access to plants. I know for me, anytime you collect any of this, you put a thank you down. For our way, you'll usually put down what we would say is tobacco or a sema, it's a plant element, and that's the sacrifice that we're saying thank you. And we make it. I know for me, either we can grow it at the farm from the seeds that were passed down for generations, or I make my own. So whenever I go picking, I have to make sure I do my thank yous before I pick. And then at moose hunting camp, we were able to get we had 2 deer, and we only got 1 meal. All the rest of the food goes back out to the community. So it's never about me, money. It's always about how do we take care of each other. So this is a good time to remember respecting your Nijibimadazik, your fellow living beings, whether it's the buffalo that gave his or her life for this sausage, or the clams or the mussels that gave their lives so that we can be here and have food to eat.
Yeah, so right now we're this pasta's simmering away. We're gonna let this cook up for a little bit. Once when like the potatoes are tendered and the sausage is cooked through some, that's where we're gonna add in the seafood, or the seafood portion, whether it's like the clams or the crayfish. That's where we're gonna add in next. I see that you got some Anishinaabeg.
Yes.
You know, that's one of my favorite ones, because I just love the flavor. It has like a horseradish flavor to it.
It's true. There's all kinds of different wild potatoes. I noticed when I opened this up that I had put in a wild sunchoke. And if you look for these, you can find them like on the Grand Portage Trail from back when the fur trade was going on. People would bring their foods with them and then plant them along the trail. And this year was the first year that I was able to get the sunchokes. You can see they look different than the domesticated sunchokes. But they dry better. So if we were to say, get the community out, we're gonna collect a bunch and then we're gonna dry them and have them for our food source. I'm always thinking like that, like how did people used to do it, you know? So we'd have us all coming together and harvesting and then reconstituting like he's doing here. This right here, this is the sheep potatoes, he's calling it when he says Manishi opening. And these are the ones that they're delicious. They do have a horseradish flavor. You find them mostly in the spring, and they'll only come up during the spring ephemeral season. So a lot of the foods that we have that I love to pick are most available during that 3-week period when the ground is soft enough that the spring ephemerals can come up and before the leaves have been produced. So that would be cut leaf tubers. And once you let them dry, they do have that nice horseradishy flavor. There's, like I said, there's a lot of different plants that I like to gather that time of year. So when you're thinking roots, and we're dealing with a lot of roots here, the roots are best in the earliest part of the spring or the latest part of the fall, because they're storing up every bit of energy they can possibly store up. So that's when you're gonna get the most from the root gifts. So as you can see, you know, like, be careful though, like, I know, like, if I go and gather this, I look ahead of time in May, oh, that's where the plants are. Remember that tree and that little piece of wood sitting right there? That's where I'm gonna go dig in the fall. So those are the kinds of things that might help you when if you're orienting about, like, I want to try that too. So, when you heard me say that name, or he said the name about sheet potatoes, you heard that opening again. So if you even hear something like Name Pin, which is like sturgeon potato, that's one of the names for wild ginger. That's the most common name for wild ginger. And it's Opin, it means potato.
Mhm.
So those are those kinds of starches that you would use for like maybe seasoning or for putting in your soups and things like that.
Yeah, so I have like a nice sized bag of that sheet potatoes that are powderized. And it adds like a nice flavor to dishes. Next year I'm thinking with fresh ones, I wanna like try to make it into like a paste. So like kind of like a spread for a sandwich. Then I'm also thinking about trying to do like a sheet potato, blackberry, aioli. So it's like,
Use gull eggs.
I know that's what else. Get rid of my mind. So I think that'd be a real fun experiment.
Yeah, we try to stay as indigenous as possible, and that's one of the things you do in the springtime is if you're cautious about how you gather the gull eggs and you're from a ceded territory band, you know, then you could do that and the gull will lay another egg just like a chicken does. So we have to do it the right way.
Yeah, so those herring gull eggs, you'll find them laying their eggs on the Rocky Islands up in Canada or Lake Superior, and you'll see a whole bunch of nests, maybe like 20 nests on islands.
Yeah,
And
more than that sometimes.
so if you see like 1, 2, or 3 eggs in the nest, you can take one. But if you see 4 eggs in the nest, you leave them alone. It seems kind of backwards, but the thinking is like once in that seagull egg, they have 4 eggs in their nest, they achieve their clutch. So their hormones shut off and they stop reproducing eggs. But if they have 1, 2, or 3, you take one to lay the eggs. And they can lay the eggs up to 16 times that bird. So if you think about there being 20 nests on an island, they can lay up to 16 times. That's close to 400 eggs. So it's basically like an infinite food glitch.
Yeah.
And you're not affecting the population at all. But they're protected as a migratory bird species. So it's illegal to practice that here in the States. So we've gone up in Canada and done it over in Treaty 3 lands.
Well, plus I want to say that being for Redcliffe, that Derek has the ceded territory rights. And I know some people are uncomfortable about that because they say, wait a minute, I want to do that too. Well, remember at one point, Native folks were here and, you know, there was a lot more clean water, clean land, accessibility to food, and we had what you would call food sovereignty. A really good example of that is when I was a little girl, my mom would send me out to go pick clams. And I would pick clams and get a bucket, and we didn't have a lot, and we would boil it up and that was dinner. Now you can't do that because the waterways are so polluted and so damaged that there aren't hardly any clams. This one right here is from the Minnesota River. That's just this last year I picked this up. And then this one is from the Mississippi River. So some of our rivers have very endangered species of clams. You can find these dead ones though along the banks sometime. But when I was little, it wasn't that way. There was enough so that we could go and use that as a food source. So if you're interested in that, in fact, I hope you are, because the tribes are trying to restore the populations of the clams, the mussels, and that's part of the effort that we see with the Prairie Island folks and the people along the rivers there to say, let's restore some of what's been wiped away. But, you know, you'll see that if we can get the rivers clean enough and try to promote that, you'll see some societies like the Xerxes Society is another program where they're trying to monitor what mussels are out there and how can we restore what's not there anymore.
So we got some clams here from the Seward Co-op. Beagle clams. These are called cherry stone
Yeah.
clams, which I believe are native to the East Coast. I think they have some cultural significance.
We're hoping to look in there and see if we can find out, so, yeah, I know for some types of clams, you'll look for the purple, for my people, the Six Nations folks, you'll look for the purple in the clamshell. And if you looked at wampum back in the day, that wampum is from the clamshell, the purple and the white pieces of the shell was drilled out, and then it's very meticulous work and it's difficult work.
Yeah.
But I know some of our students from Green Wild Health in the past, their families were involved in creating jewelry for, using these clamshells.
Yeah, so these are like our last two elements of the dish, is these crayfish and these clams. So there's I think a few different kinds of species of crayfish. I think the ones that this one actually might be a native one. I know there's this one right here. I think this is native to more south, like kind of like towards like Alabama and stuff. The rusty crayfish. They got these the little like the red dot right there. So
There you go, yeah. So that's an invasive species. Unfortunately, people who were fishing brought them up here thinking, oh, this is great bait, but they kind of wiped out a lot of the indigenous crayfish. When I was young, of course, I'm making me sound like I'm a million years old, but if we didn't have any luck fishing, we would switch over and we would catch crayfish. So this summer, Derek and I were out catching crayfish, and it was fun. And we would take that, and we'd boil it up, and this is how we would do it, I promise you. You'd get an old coffee tin, and you'd have water in there, and you'd use, if you didn't have any luck fishing, you get them to bite on a little piece of a nightcrawler or earthworm, and there you go. So, in Ojibwe, you call them Aishangeshiwag, like the little feeders, like if you were an Aishangeshi and Nini, Gemango Aishangeshi Kwe, you're someone who feeds others. So that's something that is when you use that word, you're talking about that with the crayfish. There's different legends that talk about the crayfish as big eaters.
So I have fond memories of my childhood. Me and my brother and some of my cousins, we would go out collecting this crayfish every 4th of July. We'd just go to like a lake and we'd flip over the rocks and we'd find them and just stick our hands in there and grab them. Like Hope was saying, the way we were catching them was we'd like put a little worm on a fishing line. If we got a fish, we'd like use the guts. And it would just kind of like almost just like bait the crayfish, dangle the little worm in front of them, and once they grab the worm, they don't want to let go. Once they get to their mouth, they just like a out of the water. So what do you think about this one? It doesn't have that red dot.
So this is likely a native crayfish. Again, they just recently, DNR's been looking at the number of crayfish, but that's fairly recent. Just in the last 15 years or so, they've been looking at the populations of crayfish. So you'll see we're dealing with what basically is a mini lobster. So I know, like I said, when I was young, we boil them up and we make up crayfish etouffee. So this is kind of what we're doing right here. And when they're boiled, it'll release that flavor. So there's a wonderful flavor, and they'll turn red, as you put them in.
These ones kind of look alien, like when you really start to look at their face. Yeah, so the way that we tell when these ones are ready is like Hope was saying, they'll turn like a bright red color, and with the clams, they'll open up when they're ready. So these have pretty similar cooking times. So I'm just gonna put these ones in first. I'm just gonna throw in a few of them.
I wish you all could smell what I could smell.
It
There's
smells
this
so
wonderful sausage, buffalo sausage smell, and now we're gonna get the crayfish, the lobster type boil smell, and then we'll get that delicious clam smell. So it's kind of exciting to have a sensory experience with your food like this.
Julian, long story short, says they used to find crayfish in Minnehaha Creek when they were a kid. Yeah.
Well, who knows? Like I said, I'm excited that there's efforts now to restore some of, I was hearing from some of the people working at Prairie Island that they were looking at butterfly clams that, you know, they're bluish and they open up like that. And they were thinking that they might have been completely wiped out, but they started to find them and they realized they need back bays to thrive. So that's one of the things we might be conscientious about, and the Xerxes Society might be looking at how can we make those little back bays more available so that we don't lose some of our precious shelled relatives like the mussels and clams. We're very fortunate to have places like the St. Croix River where we have, I know I've heard over 50 different kinds of indigenous mussels. So if we can protect those areas, make sure they stay cold and clean and clear, then they can stay with us. A lot of things that people don't realize is that, say for example, if you're going to have clams or filter feeders like this, when they're tiny, they catch a ride on the gills of fish. So that's where they can relocate along the rivers. And so they'll only pick specific fish for specific species. So if you have 52 different species of mussels, you're going to say, oh, well, I wonder what kind of fish that these are connected to. So it's interesting to find all these intense relationships that are happening in the wild.
So maybe we worthwhile to talk about how you would clean clams. So you can like put them in salt water and let them sit in there for like 20 or 30 minutes. Then rinse them real good. You can take like a brush and like almost like one of these like dish scrubbies. Just make sure it has like no soap on it. Just real scrub it good. Get all like the dirt off it and stuff like that. And then once you cook it up, they'll pop open once they're ready. So very simple to cook clams, and they're very delicious. And I'm not too sure about like the nutritional content, but I'm sure they're great for you. I'm sure.
Great protein.
Yeah.
I know when I was little, we would always want to get freshwater pearls. So if we've got a bunch of them for food, we'd say, put a piece of sand in there and maybe you'll get a freshwater pearl, which we used to find sometimes when we would get them for food along the different rivers around here. I also want to mention that just because you might hear, oh, this is good to eat, don't always just assume you know. Like he's talking about cleaning clams. I'm cautious about, I've never eaten snails because snail digestive systems are really slow and food tends to rot in their digestive system. So you can get really sick. So make sure you know what you're doing before just like trying to try something and not figure out what's the appropriate way to process it.
That's a really good point. I've never been brave enough to just eat
Eat a snail.
a handful of snails. I'm interested about the pearl thing. So like, when you're doing that like live clams, you would stick sand in there and put it back in the water.
Yep.
Where they burn.
Yeah.
That's
Well, we tried, but they move around.
Yeah.
So like this summer when I just for fun, I'll like follow, you can see the trails that they made. I mean, so if you really get interested in reviving the populations, you can spend some time in some of these cleaner waterways and watch how you think, what, clams moving around? It's like, yeah, they'll make a trail in the mud or in the sand and they'll follow like the water levels and stuff like that. And what looks like a giant tongue is their foot, and that's how they move. So but that's the tasty part too, the muscle that helps hold it shut, and then the part that sticks out like that. So yeah.
So right now we've got the pots simmering, got the lid on, so like we're trapping that heat and then allowing that steam to cook it up even more. I keep checking it, and they slowly start opening up a little bit more and more. There's
seafood smell.
They're slowly starting to peak up a little bit, but it's still got.
Oh, you better take a look at this. So, it's up to you. I was wondering if you wanted to put whitefish in here too, if you wanted to get a little bit more that seafood background. The whitefish are running right now. You say, well, what does that mean? The whitefish are a type of a fish, whitefish, a dickamake, is how you say it in Ojibwe. They mate right now, they spawn right now, so they wait until the water gets a certain coldness. So it has to be pretty cold, and then they come into the shallows to spawn. So they're a good fish for a boil. So some of you may have heard of Wisconsin fish boils and things like that, where a lot of times whitefish will be an element in that.
Is there any other fish that you would see a lot that were in boils?
Tulipies are very similar to whitefish, but both of them are good smoked. A lot of people say, bring me some smoked whitefish, bring me some smoked tulipies, or Cisco's, the little ones. So, gosh, smoked fish is wonderful. But I want to make sure I'm doing it right. The elder lady that I go to up in Canada, she has one of those old smokers made out of a refrigerator from back in the day. And different people like to use different types of wood for smoking. Like for her, she likes the punky poplar wood, like a quaking aspen, smushy, that material. But some people, I remember when we were smoking suckers when I was young, sucker fish, we would use green maple, like the leaves and the green branches of the maple, and it would give it a little different flavor. So whatever you're using for smoking will give a different flavor.
Nice.
So for the suckerfish, the month of February is called the suckerfish moon, is one of the names for February, and that's when the fish are recognizing that it's getting to be warmer, so the suckerfish are coming towards the surface of the ice, and they're starting to head towards the streams to spawn. And we as the women, we would go spearing the suckerfish in the rivers, and the men would go out and spear the walleyes or the northerns in the lakes.
Mm.
And then we would smoke, build a smoker and smoke the suckerfish, the meat part of the suckerfish, and then the head was used for suckerfish soup. Now, for the moose's nose or for the cartilage in the suckerhead head, it's all cartilage. So that helps to build your cartilage. So that's why you always have these little elders going, I wish I had some suckerhead soup, or I wish I had some moose nose soup. So, it would help to build up your joints.
Oh, wow.
And ease joint pain.
Would you guys want to talk about harvesting those swan potatoes? I've got that really great picture of you doing that. Yeah, what's that like? How do you harvest them? Where do you go? What do you do?
Well, it's interesting. The name Winnipeg is from the swan potatoes. Winnebago, that's from the swan potatoes. Winnebagoshish up north by Cass Lake. What that means, that's the Ojibwe word. Winne is referring to dinner or dirty, and nibit is water. And what it is when people used to go harvest duck potatoes, swan potatoes, you would walk in the water and use your feet. So you would dig into the water with your toes and your feet, and that's when you would loosen these swan potatoes or duck potatoes, and they would float to the surface. Now, when I was younger, if I would ever find these, it was usually because a muskrat or a goose or a swan they love to eat them too. So if they ever are digging around, they're going to find the really good ones, the sweet white ones that don't have any bitterness to them. And they'd be floated to the surface, but they've dug into the mud to get them. And that's what people used to do. Native people would dig into the water and it would create dirty water. So you'd use your feet to do that. And so nowadays, when you hear that word Winnipeg, they're talking about that the water is stirred up. It looks dirty. Winnebagoshish, if some of you know about Lake Winnebagoshish, it means not only is it dirty, but it's pitiful. the shish is talking about, because it's not very deep, it's a shallow lake. So Winnebagoshish, I'm thinking that's why they would say that it's dirty water, but it's also not a deep lake. When they saw people, and I don't mean to be at all saying anything negative, when they saw people harvesting in the water with their, loosening the tubers in the water, they might be harvesting the duck potatoes. They might be harvesting the lotus root, that some people call that the mud potato or mud banana. It looks like a banana. It's wonderful starch. So they're digging with their feet into the mud and loosening up those starchy food products, food sources. So when people saw native people doing that, they said, oh, those are Winnebagos, so that's one of the names you'll see commonly for Ho-Chunk people. But it wasn't intended as a slang because non-native people wanted those foods too. So you could purchase like these potatoes and these kinds of foods.
Look at that. Look at that.
Wow. So in Ojibwe for shell, you say ace, and they're considered alive. So ace sug. So, a lot of times you'll see people use shells for smudging. So often that's what I'm thinking about. And then you can see the purple is perfect for the water. Purple is so beautiful. Yeah.
Like another thing about seafood boils is that they always have like a dipping sauce, like a spicy butter sauce, but I feel like the quality of these ingredients are so high and they're just delicious on their own. The last thing I want to do is like ruin the integrity and like have like a dip in burger. It's not necessary for this. Everything here is very delicious and we don't need all that unnecessary unhealthy calories in our bodies. So this is the final dish. I think we should open up to questions.
Yes.
Yeah, just wondering if anyone has any questions. I just asked in the chat and we'll see. Let's see. Elaine is saying that they used to net whitefish on Little Winnie Lake. Yeah.
I've been to Little Winnie's, Little Winnebagosish.
Oh yeah, you're everyone loved the picture of you two harvesting the potatoes in the mud, knee deep. Yeah. Not getting any questions yet.
Derek here, because here's me, I was digging around in the mud with my hands, and he started to go back and do it old style with his feet, and that's where he really found the trick was, yep, use your feet.
Yeah.
That's what works.
Yeah.
Oh, like a little tip with Black Elk shared with me. It was just like, just keep digging in there with your feet, and if you feel something on the bottom of your foot, you can pull it out, and then pull your foot out and put your hand in there and grab it. It was a very efficient way of doing it instead of like using your hands and digging a pit and having to cover it back up or using a shovel. So I found that the old style way worked best. Well, I guess the only thing you gotta be careful of is like where you're doing that. So like there can be like fish hooks buried in the ground or glass. So you want to be definitely cautious and be aware like your feet are kind of in danger when you're sticking it in where you don't know where it might go. So be careful out there.
One thing we noticed when we were digging these is that, if you run into some that are mushy, and don't feel bad about, oh no, we waited too long and now they're mushy, because now they are providing nutrients for all the microbiotics that are living in the soil, and that's going to help all the plants come back up. So for those of you who are thinking about what's going on with climate change and the microbiotics, which is something I think a lot about, the fungus and the microbiotics in the soil, so that the nutrients are still available. Plants like these are just like when you use a cover crop like radishes that rot in the soil but provide food for all those little tiny beings that make food nutrition accessible to all of us.
Amazing. Where can people find more about Indigenous food or the organizations that you two are working for? What's coming up next for the winter?
It doesn't stop. There's always stuff going on. We have this wonderful series.
Yes.
Lift it up.
Yes.
And I want to lift up this young man's work too with Wiisinig.
Yeah, so I do have like a social media platform and website called Wiisinig LLC. It's WIISINIG LLC. So you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and then also a website. We're doing a lot of advertising, a lot of upcoming classes that we're doing. Also just doing like posts about different indigenous foods. So if you're interested in this kind of stuff, feel free to check it out. We also got some videos on the YouTube channel, Pope and I, doing some classes and some teaching. So feel free to check it out.
Follow us on Dream of Wild Health. We have a social media network going on where we have different videos and we have recipes, and some of you have already seen Vanessa and Marissa hard at work showing about nutrition and different kinds of recipes out there. So, yeah, we're gonna keep at it.
Don't forget about the Vision of Indian work.
Yeah.
We're right on Lake Street, right across from Midtown Global Market, and we also have a website as well, social media. So check them out as well. So we're doing a lot of cool things over there.
I want to lift up that part of the reason why we're doing this, we're not doing this to say, oh, look at, she's so cool, he's so cool. This is for the future of our young people. And I know Derek is such an amazing role model for the young men that I work with. So like this summer, he was teaching young men that I work with about like, how do you process a raccoon, you know, so for eating, and it was wonderful. And that kind of thing is happening all the time. So we're looking at how do we get our young people engaged with looking at our old foods, but how do you prepare these foods and make the foods palatable for our diets today? And how do we make sure that we're passing on whatever we know to the next ones? We're just as Frank Fools Pro used to say, we're just hollow bones with the light shining through.
Love
I just
that.
recommend everyone to like get out there and try to familiar yourself with at least one plant or animal. You know, you think about all like the change that's coming in the world, whether it's climate change, we're not sure like which ones will be able to stick around, whether it's domesticated ones or the wild ones. And you know, we saw like our supply chain system is very fragile. So if things go awry, you want to make sure that you can take care of yourself and your loved ones. So and it also doesn't hurt to have a relationship with those wild beings. So get out there, enjoy nature. So that's part of life.
I'd say make sure, start to educate yourself about what is thriving. Like, for example, lamb's quarters is a natural. If you want to get started, it's more nutritious than spinach. It's a volunteer. You can use the seeds for making flour. There's so many plants like that, that if you have a yard and you just have grass, here's a potential food setting for you. And find out, you know, go to your local co-op and find out how to make it even more interesting. So I know I do that. I love to come to Seward and I'll get like one carrot, one turnip, and what else did I find out in the woods? That's dinner.
Love that. Well, thanks you two. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for teaching this one with us again. We're so happy to have you.
Thank
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. Be welcome.
you.